Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. My name is Eddie Amin, and I'm with a co-presenter from APA, Jenny Smolson. Thank you so much for tuning in to our webinar. We had a very popular response for this. As you know, the topic is public service loan forgiveness, how you can get it, and why we're fighting to preserve it. We hope for this webinar to last no more than 45 minutes today. There'll be a chance for you to ask questions. I hope that the information that you'll walk away from today will be extremely useful for you. Right now, all attendees are on mute. There are handouts that you can download. So if you go to your GoToWebinar toolbar, you'll see that there are two different handouts that you can download at any time. And then we're also going to make this webinar recording and the slides available as soon as possible after the session. As soon as we have our information gathered and any corrections or additions to the slides completed, we will send all attendees an email, including those who registered but couldn't make it today. So we're grateful that you could be here, and stay tuned if you want to replay any of this at a later time or share it with others. We're going to cover a lot of ground today, but do so in a detailed and organized way. We'll begin with a program overview. Many of you had a lot of questions about public service loan forgiveness, and that helped inform how we're going to talk about what that program is. We'll then share some tools that are available to you to help manage public service loan forgiveness, as well as other financial aspects of your lives. I'll turn it over to Jenny, and she'll talk about a view from Capitol Hill in terms of what's happening with public service loan forgiveness and where we think it might be headed in the future with a new Congress starting in 2019. We'll then talk about your chance to advocate. We hope that many of you not only see yourselves as consumers of student education debt, but have a responsibility and see yourselves as being responsible to help change the tides and speak up to your federal members of Congress about what we need for the responsible and capable federal loan forgiveness program. And then we'll take some questions from each of you. I want to make one important disclaimer, which is that we cannot provide financial or legal advice, but we will do our best to provide accurate information. We recommend if there's anything that's unclear, or if you want further information, you should consult with your loan servicer, a financial advisor, an accountant, and/or an attorney as needed. If you have a question, I encourage you to use the question tab in the GoToWebinar tool panel. You won't be able to talk during the webinar, but as questions come through, I'll be receiving them and doing our best to prioritize those that we haven't covered already. We'll get to as many questions as possible. Please know that we've already incorporated about 100 questions that we received from pre-registrants into the content that we're providing today. So we hope that we're going to hedge your questions before you even need to ask them again. But again, please do use the question box as you would like. And this is me. I am, again, Eddie Amin. I oversee the offices on early career psychologists and on graduate students, better known as APAGs at APA. And one of the reasons why I care so much about public service loan forgiveness, not only for the thousands of APA members that I have the great honor of serving, but also I plan to take advantage of the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program as APA is a 501c3 organization, and as an early career psychologist myself, I've certainly accumulated my fair share of student loan debt on the way to becoming a psychologist. If you have questions for me, feel free to reach me at eamin@apa.org. And I'm joined by Jennifer Smolson. Jenny is a senior legislative and federal affairs officer at APA. She's been at APA for a long time and is quite an institutional storehouse of tremendous knowledge, as well as the shifting winds on Capitol Hill. She used to work on the Hill as a former professional staff member for the Senate Health Committee. That's the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. Jenny can be reached at jsmolson, that's JSMULSON at apa.org. Let's go right into the program overview.
Thanks, Eddie, and welcome, participants. I'm really excited to be with you today. I thought it might be helpful to start with a little bit of background about the program. As you may know, Senator Ted Kennedy had this great idea to create a program that provided forgiveness for the outstanding loan balance for borrowers who committed to 10 years of service and work to the public. He understood that because of increasing debt burdens, many graduates who wanted to serve others might not be able to afford to do that. As participants today, I think you know this personally. First, affordability can be a barrier to pursuing higher education, and debt certainly can create disincentives for students to consider more low-paying but critically needed careers in public service. So what did Senator Kennedy say? This is an incentive for young people to be able to go into public service, serve their community, and I think it's enormously important and responsive to the times. So we can go to the next slide. This program remains a really critically important tool, even 11 years after it's the first kernel of an idea that it started with. So Senator Kennedy, in one of his last acts, worked with Congress and the Bush administration to create this program. And from its inception, the program had some pretty basic and pretty great ingredients. It adopts the vision of a legislative lion who was personally, as well as his family, committed to public service. It was created with bipartisan support, Republicans and Democrats, to foster access to post-secondary study and pave paths to pursue public service, even in the face of debt upon graduation. It was authorized first time as part of the College Cost and Reduction and Access Act of 2007. So just last year, the first cohort of borrowers is really eligible for submitting that formal application for public service loan forgiveness. While each of you may be hoping to benefit from public service loan forgiveness, let's not forget there's really a 2-for-1 benefit that we see to the program. First, as you know, borrowers will benefit. Students who borrow federal funds to pursue post-secondary degrees, it could be a 4-year degree, a graduate degree, a doctorate degree, a professional degree. Borrowers like you might be pursuing a path in a variety of different fields: psychology, teaching, public safety, law enforcement, law as a prosecutor or public defender, and healthcare, again, as a psychologist, a nurse, a doctor, or a social worker. And this program affords borrowers like you a means to getting out from under debt that might otherwise be really insurmountable. And this is especially true for lower and middle income borrowers or families. But it's really important in our view to consider who else might benefit from this program and who else does benefit from this program. And it's communities throughout the country and communities in every single state and congressional districts, individuals living in communities who might not otherwise have access to critical education or mental health services or supports if it weren't for people like you and other graduates who wanted to provide services to those in need through government or nonprofit work. People in communities across the country benefit from this program: school children, those with substance abuse problems, individuals with unmet mental health needs, and many, many more. So I'm going to turn it back over to Eddie to give us an overview of the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program.
Thank you, Jenny. And I want to just especially appreciate Jenny for being on the call today. She is battling a cold and just so dedicated to making sure that our members have the information they need, that I owe her a debt of gratitude for coming into the office to help us get this underway. So
happy to do it.
With that framework of why public service loan forgiveness is so important and vital to our economy and to us as folks that are serving important needs in our society, there are really just 4 ingredients to public service loan forgiveness: eligibility and forgiveness. But I will say that some of you may be dialing in because of some anxiety that you've heard about the initial rounds of applicants getting denied. I'll touch that in a bit, but first let me make sure that we're all on the same page with what it takes to get public service loan forgiveness. So the government agrees to forgive your loan balance, A, after you make 120 monthly payments, B, when you're on federal direct consolidated loans, C, in a qualified income-based repayment plan, and D, while working in a qualified employment setting. Those are really the 4 ingredients, and I'll go through each one because there are some finer print for each, as I'm sure you're aware. Let's tackle the first one about making 120 monthly payments. These payments don't need to be made consecutively. So you do not need to work from payment 1 through payment 120 in the same job. This is not saying you can never take any time off and so forth. An example I provided here is that you might in 1 year make 12 payments. The next year you may only make 3 payments and then take a medical leave. You might make 10 the next. The first 2 months are part-time and they don't qualify. And then the following year, you might make 6 payments because you worked on a government contract and that contractor was not an eligible employer. So there are a lot of ways that you can get to 120. Many people consider it a 10-year plan if they plan to work full-time and meet all the other criteria, because 10 times 12 months a year is 120, but it does not need to be consecutive. Payments must be made on time. They cannot be more than 15 days late. Of course, for your credit score and to keep yourself in good graces, getting into that close to 15-day late territory is not advised. So try to make your payments on time. They must be made as scheduled and for the full amount due. So if your loan servicer says that you owe $500 and you mail in $300, that is not going to count. And if you make 2 payments in a month, let's say you get your tax refund and you say, I'm going to double up my payments, that is not going to help you get your loans forgiven any faster. They're only to be paid on billed loan payments. You cannot be in a couple of different statuses as well. You cannot be in an in-school status, and you cannot be on grace periods, a deferment, or forbearance. According to the Government Accountability Office, or the GAO, whose reports we read to prepare for this webinar, payments are easier to track when they're made to Fed Loans. Fed Loans is one of the loan servicers that contracts with the Department of Education, and right now it is the only one that has the Department of Ed's contract to certify employers and to help you keep track of how many loan payments you're making towards your 120. Through some of the reports we read, when your loans are with Fed Loans, it's easier to track the eligible payments. So we'll get to that in just a second as one of the hurdles for you getting public service loan forgiveness. But step A, make 120 monthly payments. Step B, make sure that your loans are federal direct consolidated loans. This means any non-defaulted loan received under the federal direct loan program. Perhaps when you are borrowing from the federal government, they're called different things. But after you graduate and when you begin repayment, you should look at making sure that your loans fall under the federal direct consolidated loan program. FFEL, Perkins, and private loans do not count. I need to emphasize that a lot of our borrowers as members sometimes have to take out private loans once they reach the federal borrowing cap in pursuit of their graduate degree. Private loans cannot be rolled into direct consolidated loans. They're not owned by the federal government, and the federal government will not help you repay or forgive those at any point in time. So you might have both direct loans and that you're making payments on it, as well as private loans. And that's okay, you can continue to do so, but you can't roll them all together. The CLARC will restart if you consolidate your direct loans with other loans. Now, if you reconsolidate, you will be back at the 0 month marker. Your loans are eligible irrespective of whether you earn them while in pursuit of an undergrad degree, a master's degree, a doctoral degree. As long as you have eligible student loans in this program, you can have them forgiven. You can figure out the loan types in 2 different places: the National Student Loan Data Service, that's nslds.ed.gov, or studentloans.gov. You'll have to log in with some of your information, probably the same information that you use to complete your FAFSAs, and then you can check out the kind of loans that you have. Ingredient C is making sure that you are making those 120 payments on your direct loans while in a qualified income-based repayment plan. This is where some people get tripped up because there are only certain plans that are eligible. Right now, the government says that there are 4 eligible plans to qualify, and these are typically, but not always, based on your monthly income as well as your family size. There are pay, repay, IBR, and ICR. Pay is the pay-as-you-earn plan. Repay is the revised pay-as-you-earn plan. IBR stands for the income-based plan, income-based repayment plan, rather, and ICR is the income contingent repayment plan. Each of them has a slightly different formula to figure out how much you owe, and you can switch between the plans over time if you find out that one will reduce your amount. But please note, and this is also from personal experience, when you switch between these plans, you may be delayed. Your loans might be put on an administrative forbearance for a couple of months while your loan servicer switches your payment plans. So you might not have anything due, or you may have a very small amount due in those months, and those months won't count towards your 120 total. Another plan that qualifies is the 10-year standard repayment plan. But I've written here that it's not logical to pursue that plan, because if you intend to have a zero loan balance at the end of 10 years, then you really don't need to take advantage of the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. One minor note, and this is not to confuse you, but I just wanted to make sure that you were aware, there are two payment plans that have a very similar name, but one is not eligible. That's the Standard Repayment Plan for Direct Consolidated Loans. I would encourage you to read up on these different plans and play with some of the calculators that are freely available to you to determine the pros and cons of each. A bonus tip that I've offered is that you might as well estimate your repayment amounts at studentloans.gov, especially if you haven't begun loan payment or you want to see if it's worth switching. And ingredient D is the ingredient that says you must work in a qualified employment setting in order to be eligible. So provided you've done A, B, and C, Part D has a number of finer print items. The most important one for you to know is it's not about your position or the degree that you have. The government says that they care about the employment setting you are in. So it's about the employer. And I'll get back to that in just a second. It's also saying that you must work a full-time equivalent. The government defines this as a minimum of 30 hours per week at an annual average. If you work in 2 part-time employment settings or more, they must total to be 30 hours or greater. If your full-time company says that full-time for them is 35 hours, it's whichever is greater, either 30, which is the bare minimum, or the higher amount that's considered full-time by your employer. Now, these are the kind of qualified employment settings. Government organizations at any level, from federal to state to local to tribal government organizations. Another big umbrella category are tax-exempt 501c3 not-for-profit organizations. So it could be an organization with as many as 600 employees like the APA, or it could be a very tiny nonprofit organization with just a few employees. Again, if they have tax-exempt 501c3 status, and your employer should be able to tell you if they do or not, then you're blanketly covered. There are also a number of organizations that are not tax exempt, but they are 501c nonprofit organizations. And these qualify if their primary mission is a qualifying public service. And you could read the fine print if you look for an employment certification form online. And these are readily and easily searchable. But I'll just read some of the categories that qualify here. Public safety, law enforcement, public interest legal services, early childhood education, public service for individuals with disabilities and the elderly, other school-based services, public education, and public health. So if you know for sure that you're not in a tax-exempt 501c3, but think that you might be in one of these other categories, I encourage you to download the form and read the fine print. Also, feel free to speak to your loan servicer or the Department of Education to get greater clarity. If you've done AmeriCorps or Peace Corps or plan to pursue that, that would be a qualified employer, as well as, actually, let me get into the non-permissible employers. For-profit organizations. So if you work for a profit-based company, a partisan organization, a labor union, or any for-profit government contractor, even if that contractor is working for a qualified employer, for example, a contractor that's housed within the Department of Defense, that would not qualify you. So please keep all this in mind, and then when in doubt, make sure that you are reading up on the fine print. There are 2 hurdles that you must go through in order to get public service loan forgiveness. The first one is to certify your employment setting as well as your loans. I've taken a screenshot from the GAO analysis of data from the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, the first 8 months of the program. And what you're looking at here is the 1.1 million borrowers who have done some kind of certification process. 44% of those 1.1 million in the first 8 months have certified their at least one payment as being eligible. 56% of borrowers who requested to have their employment and loan certified were denied or had yet to record a qualifying payment. Now, of that amount, the largest category were certified because they had worked in a qualified setting, but they had yet to make any qualifying payments. So maybe those are folks that are really on top of it. They've taken a new job. They say, let me get into the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. Great. And they've done so, but they have yet to make any qualifying payments on record. 13% of this 1.1 million were denied because they had not any qualifying loans. So perhaps they weren't in the federal direct loan program. And 11% were denied for a number of other reasons. Unfortunately, I can't tell you here that the majority were certified and they had no problems, but I imagine that a number of that 56% that requested and were yet denied are able to fix some of the errors that led to such denial. So the second hurdle is applying for forgiveness. Once you've certified your loans and your employers and your loan servicer has 120 payments on record for you, you then will begin the application process. So if you're just graduating now and beginning your loans, you won't have to face this process for at least 10 years. And this is where some of you may have heard some news that the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program is in deep trouble because a number of people have been denied. Well, let's look at the numbers a little bit more carefully. Again, this data comes from the GAO. As of April 2018, just over 19,000 people have submitted a loan forgiveness application. The government still, or My Fed Loans is still processing 2,400 of those. Of the 19,000, over 8,000 had qualifying employment and loans. That's great. But only 184 had 120 qualified payments. So some people may be submitting early or thinking that they had 120, but yet upon further clarification, they did not. And 55 had been granted loan forgiveness in the first 8 months of the program's eligibility. 55 from 19,000. The government is still processing applications, and sometimes that can take a while. You are expected to continue to make payments until the processing is complete. So some takeaways from this for us are that we have responsibilities as borrowers to manage up. Many of you perhaps have heard the term, if you're in an organization, it's helpful sometimes to learn how to manage your manager, manage your supervisor. So we're encouraging you to do the same with your loan servicer. Once you certify your employment and it is approved, your loan servicer will become Fed Loans. Some people wait until the end of those 10 years, but I, based on a lot of the things I read, find that people have better luck qualifying for public service loan forgiveness once they begin the employment certification process early. And because Fed Loans is the only servicer that deals with public service loan forgiveness, if you have a different servicer, it will be switched to Fed Loans. Managing up also involves filing your employment certification forms regularly and at the end of employment periods. So since I began my pathway to public service loan forgiveness, I worked at APA. And each year I put it in my calendar to go down to my human resources office with my certification form and ask for my human resource manager to sign off saying that I continue to be employed. Once that form is submitted to Fed Loans and they process it, it certifies both that I made another 12 months of payments towards my 120 total, and it continues to affirm that I'm working in a qualified employment setting. I encourage you not to wait to the end of your 10 years to go back to your old employers and ask them to certify and sign your forms. If you keep track of it regularly, that is good managing up. You also have to provide income-based plan information annually. Your loan servicer will remind you when the time is up for you to either port in your W-2 and your IRS information or otherwise find ways to certify that your income has or has not changed. And you can always check your online loan accounts. Do not wait until 10 years is up to log in. If things look discrepant, I highly encourage you to call your loan servicer. And sometimes it's the luck of the draw. You might speak to somebody who has expertise in a certain aspect of loan management when you call, and you might have better luck if you call back. So if something is still not right, hang up and call back. I'm going to cover 3 tools that are, oh, actually, I'm going to give this to Jenny. Jenny's going to walk through some of the tools that are available to you.
Eddie, I think you're going to walk through those tools real quick.
Well, let's walk together. Okay.
Let's walk together. Let's walk together, everyone. Yep.
The first one,
I can talk a little bit about studentaid.gov, and then I can toss it over to you, Eddie. But studentaid.gov, I would say, is a critical resource that you should bookmark on as a website and look at it often and always, because that, in the end of the day, is going to be the definitive place to find the kind of information that you need. Studentaid.ed.gov will tell you how to repay your loans. There's a tab in there about repayment. There's a tab there for public service loan forgiveness. And we recently saw that there's a brand new tool that's been included on that page, which is a public service loan forgiveness toolkit, which we have not had a chance to play around with, but might be a wonderful resource for you. It has all the Q&As, in-depth facts. It has copies of the employment certification form and the public service loan forgiveness application. So when in doubt, and as a starting point always, I would highly recommend that you visit studentaid.ed.gov as that first line resource for any questions you might have.
Thanks, Jenny. And that's absolutely right. That's where we get a lot of our information from as well. That's where a lot of the loan servicers are getting their information from in addition. So I talked a lot about that public service loan forgiveness employment certification form. There's the cover page right there. It's not a lot to fill out. But once you do fill it out, it'll initiate a process where Fed Loans is keeping track of how many payments you're making and your employment eligibility. APA has got a toolkit that we put together on affording and repaying graduate school. Sometimes when I present on public service loan forgiveness, I begin with the amount of the median debt that our members have, as well as a picture about salaries. Now, rather than start that information off today in the webinar, I'm just going to direct you to read more up on it. But this toolkit, though, is frequently updated. And if you're interested in learning how to budget, if you're interested in comparing cost of living between where you're going to your doctoral program and where you're going to do a postdoc, and perhaps where you're going to settle and relocate with your family, it's got a lot of great calculators in there to compare cost of living and so forth. So check out that toolkit. And then if you are an APA member, if you're not, we hope you do join. If you are a member, you already have access to this great, relatively new resource that we brought in through our membership office. It's called ION Tuition. ION Tuition is a one-stop portal where you can connect your student loan account to ION Tuition, and it will help you get a sense of some different options for repayment and forgiveness. There are calculators built into this tool, and And the thing that I like most about it, I think a lot of our members are taking advantage of, the more and more people hear about it, is the online and phone-based loan counseling. So this will be a third party separate from your loan servicer who can help provide some advice to you for free. And that's a benefit to APA members. So if you don't want to type in this long address, you can probably put in your search engine APA and then ION tuition. And then a final resource we want to highlight for you are congressional caseworkers. Here, for example, we went to Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi's webpage where it says, how can I help you? To find the contact information for either the local district office, which will be in your state, or the federal office. And placing a telephone call to the office and saying, I'd like to speak with a caseworker to talk about my student loans, will get this process started for you. We encourage you to pursue this, especially if you're facing frustration with your loan servicer. Getting your elected official and their staff involved to help you might just be the thing that you need. So I'm going to turn it back to Jenny, who's going to provide a lot of great perspectives on what's happening and how you can get involved.
Thank you, Eddie. So I just wanted to take a few minutes and consider what's in store for the public service loan forgiveness by discussing the work in Congress and the role of the administration as it relates to public service loan forgiveness. We can go ahead, next slide. And so this past year was a really challenging one for the program. Every 5 or 7 years or thereabouts, Congress is responsible for reauthorizing the Higher Education Act. And this legislation sort of provides the framework for the nation's federal investment in post-secondary study. It's the place where you find out how Pell Grants work, how the loans programs work. This 115th Congress that we're in, the House Education and the Workforce Committee made the most progress on reauthorizing that Higher Education Act. And unfortunately, their actions included an outright assault on the public service loan forgiveness program. In the legislation that they advanced through the committee, the public service loan forgiveness program was eliminated for new borrowers. So this action was coupled with an administration that also called for the elimination of the public service loan forgiveness, again, also for new borrowers. I think that was one of the questions. It was current borrowers were grandfathered, but for any new borrowers, the program would not be a possibility. So this made for a very rocky legislative landscape. And through a concerted effort on the part of the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Coalition, and APA is a very active member of that group, we really fought to get into congressional offices and to inform representatives about public service loan forgiveness, how the program is benefiting borrowers and communities, and talk about the value and the impact of that program. So while that House committee passed legislation, which was called the Prosper Act, that legislation did not advance for any kind of floor consideration. And given the remaining amount of time for this 115th Congress, I would say that bill is all but dead for now. The Senate didn't really move forward with any draft of the Higher Ed Act reauthorization, though based on discussions with staff, there was not really an interest in eliminating public service loan forgiveness, though there was some discussion about changes that they might propose to the program, which did include perhaps limiting the amount of forgiveness. So what's going to change this next Congress in January of the 2019 when we welcome the 116th Congress? Well, the first big and significant change is that the U.S. House of Representatives will now be controlled by the Democrats. So that Prosper Act that I mentioned is out, and the new higher ed reauthorization bill called AIM Higher is in. And this vision for higher ed reauthorization is different than its predecessor. It preserves and expands public service loan forgiveness. Representative Bobby Scott, who will be the incoming chair of what's going to be now called the Education and Labor Committee, has stated that the higher ed reauthorization is a high priority for the committee, and that AIM Higher, that new legislation I just mentioned, will be a starting point for what he hopes to be a bipartisan reauthorization effort. So we still, the Senate is also signaling that they want to get busy on doing a Higher Ed Act reauthorization. And again, this Higher Ed Act reauthorization is home now to the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. It's the vehicle that describes what the program does and how it works. The Trump administration is still opposed to the program, but they're going to have to contend with greater oversight and greater interest from this engaged House committee. So while the landscape has changed and the prospects for preserving the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program look much more favorable, in order to ensure that Public Service Loan Forgiveness is maintained and strengthened, and the Department of Education is really taking care and consideration in the administration of this program, grassroots advocacy is essential. So we'll go to the next slide. So how can individuals like you or organizations like APA be engaged and inform these really critical policy discussions and decisions? So my first advice for you, for us, is to be educated. And joining us today is really a significant first step. So we're incredibly grateful that you're taking the time to be with us. In terms of engagement, the Department of Ed is going to be held to a higher level of accountability related to this Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. Again, the department is the responsible agent, and they have all the authority they need. If you read reports like that GAO report, they really do have all the authority they need to run the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program efficiently and effectively. And now we're going to have a Congress and others, including us and including you, to put pressure on them to manage this program well. They manage hundreds of programs with varying degrees of complexity, and the public should and must expect the Department of Ed to do a better job in implementing, managing, and ensuring the operability of Public Service Loan Forgiveness. The House Committee and Representative Bodie Scott, who I already just mentioned, is already signaling that they're going to be asking a lot more questions of the Department of Ed with regard to this program. And part of that question asking is trying to understand what's been a problem for borrowers. So I think it's incumbent on us, APA, and you guys to work together to inform this dialogue. And you can partner with us or other organizations that you're a member of to make sure that Congress knows about the specific programs that problems that you're facing when you're seeking to apply for public service loan forgiveness, or perhaps hurdles that you faced along the way. So we can go to the next slide. And again, I put this up here just as a reminder that when we're sharing stories about the obstacles that you may face, it's really important to couple those narratives with a reminder to whoever you're advocating with, whether it's the Department of Education, to Congress, to APA, and talking about this program, reminding everybody why it's important. Is the program still relevant? Is it still needed? So as you begin to think about your story and your relationship with public service loan forgiveness, think about a couple of these essential points and how they can provide a basis for your advocacy. The program provides a reasonable repayment option for those willing to commit to service. It provides a meaningful solution to tackling debt for students who have to borrow. It focuses on the needs of the nation by encouraging public service. And because of the time commitment to receive the benefit, public service loan forgiveness can really help with recruitment and retention in the social service sector. People who commit to 10 years of service are likely to stay doing that service. So I think it's a really critical recruitment and retention tool. So let's look at ways that you can be an advocate. I'm going to provide you with 3 ways to advocate today, from the most simple to a little bit more involved, and ways that you can play a meaningful role in advocacy, make a mark in explaining the value of public service loan forgiveness, and helping key policymakers understand obstacles so they can hold the Department of Ed accountable for better management of public service loan forgiveness. So what can you do? Action alerts. So these are simple, easily available if you go visit that link on the APA web page. I encourage you to visit that page. You're going to find background information on a lot of issues that are informed by psychology or that impact psychologists or both. So read about the advocacy work, become well versed in what the issues are, and then take that first step of being engaged. At the bottom right-hand corner of our APA page, it'll take you to our Engage page. And here you can sign up for monthly legislative updates. You can see what issues are moving on the Hill, and you can take action. And right now, there is a live action alert available to you that will allow you to contact your senators and your representatives and tell them why you believe it's important to preserve the public service loan forgiveness. So go ahead and check it out. And when you feel comfortable and ready, go ahead and take that action. Next, you can tell your story. So we have this set up as a page on the APA Engage page, again, that you've just perhaps visited. And it's on that same page where you can take action on the action alert. But we encourage you to tell us your public service loan forgiveness story. Why do we want to hear your stories? I think for us, it allows us to inform lawmakers about the types of problems or concern that borrowers are seeing in their efforts to apply for public service loan forgiveness. But equally as important, it allows them to better understand the benefits of the program and the ways that it's keeping highly qualified mental health professionals, psychologists like you, working in their local communities and improving people's lives. This will require a little bit more individual engagement, but the House Committee has told us that they feel these stories are important. We'd like to share these stories with them. And this department is responsible for running this program effectively. So understanding where the department is falling short and helping inform policy discussions to hold them accountable for the management of public service loan forgiveness starts with you, and starts with you helping policymakers understand where the problems are. So we really, really encourage you to visit that site and share your stories with us. Lastly, you can really become a grassroots leader yourself and advocate for yourself and for that public service loan forgiveness program. So really, one of the most effective ways to become engaged is to conduct an in-person or face-to-face meeting or phone call with your member of Congress. It sounds pretty daunting, but it's really not. You're a constituent. You really matter to your legislator. You have a role to play in engaging in our democracy and helping our elected officials be informed about the values of federal programs, how they're working, and if they're working to serve the people they're supposed to. So we are here at APA always to help you in this effort, but take a few minutes and consider taking your advocacy to the next level. You can easily find out who represents you in Congress. The House or the Senate website, which are listed above, you can easily find out who your senators are or your representative is. www.senate.gov, www.house.gov, pretty easy. It will provide you access to the names of your elected officials, their websites, and include all the contact information that you may need to get started. And again, you might go ahead and make that first initial inquiry with a phone call to the legislative staff responsible for public service loan forgiveness. And if you look at one of the resources that we've provided on the right, we have a public service loan forgiveness talking point. And that is a fill-in-the-blank form that we go ahead and encourage you to take a look at. It'll help guide you through any kind of phone call you might have with your elected officials or their staff people, more likely. And, there's no wrong way in doing it. So we just, especially if you can consider some of the points that we have included on that handout section. So we just encourage you to go ahead and give that a try. They want to hear from you, and hearing from you is really critical. So again, here's some helpful hints from that sheet. Fill out the talking point sheet. Provide the sort of details that matter to legislator, local details, who you're serving. Explain to them how the public service loan forgiveness has impacted your career decisions, and detail that important work that you've provided that benefits society and improves lives. And let staff know if you've faced any kind of hurdles along your way. So don't be shy. Go ahead and give it a try. So we wanted to go ahead and see if we could answer any new questions that have come in, or look at some of the questions. What we've done is sort of many of you did submit questions when you signed up for the webinar. And again, what we did notice is that many of the questions that we received could be answered by visiting studentaid.ed.gov, that website. There's a link titled Repay Loans, so really check that one out. That had a lot of specificity about part-time, full-time, marriage, and some of the other questions that seem to come up. Someone asked about overpayment, for example. That material is covered on that website, but overpayment or extra payments won't count to that 120 payments, and I think Eddie covered that. Someone asked about working in a Title I school. I don't believe that your school needs to be a Title I school for the purposes of public service loan forgiveness. If it's a public or a nonprofit school, your employment should qualify then. But look at that employment certification sheet and go ahead and follow along with it and look at the information there just to double check that. Job changes came up. We mentioned it might be valuable to talk with your new employer in advance to make sure that they fit the categories that are outlined in the law. And again, there's that brand new tool on the Public Service Loan Forgiveness website. On studentaid.gov on the Public Service Loan Forgiveness tab. And it's a help tool. We haven't had time to review it or use it, but we invite you to check it out and see if it helps in answering some of the more specific program questions that you had. And also please visit the page and the link that talks about the temporary expanded public service loan forgiveness. This is a program that was created through appropriations, through the appropriations process, and it was designed to help borrowers who had signed up, who had been otherwise met all the criteria for public service loan forgiveness, but had inadvertently signed up for an ineligible repayment plan. So this provides a remedy for borrowers who are maybe given incorrect information from servicers, and it might be of help to you. So studentaid.ed.gov, and that will have more information about this program as well.
Thanks, Jenny. I know that we've reached about a minute past our 45 minutes. Folks that need to hang up, I'm just going to let you know that you will receive an email from us within the next couple of days with handouts, and we'll also provide a link to the recording once it's up on the APA website. So if you've got to log out, please feel free. For folks that still have unanswered questions, please know that there is a questions tab. And while Jenny was presenting some information, I've been answering some of the questions made publicly available to all of you. And I'm wondering, Jenny, if we could take a couple on right now.
Sure. Is there one in particular?
There is. So, for example, is there advice for individuals who are not in the income-based repayment plan for years? I graduated in 2010, consolidated, read the details for public service loan forgiveness at the time, and consulted with my loan servicer. 7 years in, working in Title I schools, I learned I was in the wrong payment plan. Is there anything I can do besides start over?
Right, so I think you're a perfect candidate for that temporary expanded public service loan forgiveness. Again, that it's if you have a FFEL loan, you're not eligible. If it's a Perkins loan, you're not eligible. But if you have a direct loan and you were just signed up for the wrong repayment plan, so long as you've made an equivalent or greater repayment plan, repayment than you would have made under the other eligible loan repayment plan options, you may be eligible to participate in public service loan forgiveness through this special program. So I would encourage that web participant to really go look at temporary expanded public service loan forgiveness. It's abbreviated TEPSLF. And even if you just go ahead and use a search engine to find that, look at that term, it's going to bring you to that website, and that'll give you a lot of specific details about how you might take advantage of that program.
Thank you. And then a couple of questions related to employment setting. Some of our attendees are in universities. And do you know if universities qualify?
if it's a not-for-profit university, and most of our universities are, or a state public university, then that employment should qualify.
Thanks. And a couple of people have even asked this very creative question. Could I start my own nonprofit? Would I need to work at someone else's?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I might talk to someone initially just to make sure, but given what the department says about working at a nonprofit, so long as you can chronicle that you are working for the allotted amount of time, it seems like that may be an eligible employment activity.
Thanks. A couple of folks have had questions about what happens if Congress does decide to cut this, and they've already begun the employment certification process. Will there be any grandfathering? You may have spoken about the climate on the Hill, but what do you think might happen?
Right. So even when the program was eliminated under the HR 4508 or the administration's budget recommendation to eliminate the program, current borrowers were grandfathered. There was not a ton of clarity about what that means. Did it mean you had to have filed one certification form? There was not a lot of detail around that, but it does seem that even if the program were to be eliminated, people currently in the system would be grandfathered.
Thank you. So I think that there are a number of questions that perhaps, Jenny, you and I can look at and attempt to see about answering privately to individuals. Some of the answers that I was able to provide for the early question askers will be publicly available to folks if you go to the questions tab. But I think right now we'll direct people to places where they can become great informed repayers themselves. And so on our resource page up on the slide right now, studentaid.gov is the same as studentaid.ed.gov. It's going to redirect you to the same place. Somebody had asked about that. On APA.org's website, we have the Affording and Repaying Toolkit. We have the ION Tuition Tool. We have the advocacy page. And then I'm providing 2 phone numbers for you. If your loan servicer seems to not be able to answer your questions, or you have an ongoing complaint, for example, it's taking so long for anything to get done, and you want to make sure that complaint is lodged, you can speak to the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau at toll-free 1-855-411-2372. You can also call the Department of Education's loan hotline, and that's 1-800-557-7394. I hope that these resources can be good for you. Our biggest point that we want to make is that there's a lot of information that you're going to need to have your handle on in order to take advantage of this program. There's no initial application to get in, but as long as you take care of your employment certification and you meet those A, B, C, and D criteria, as I've laid out for you, you should eventually be able to get your 10 years forgiven. I want to thank you all so much for joining in. This was one of the most popular webinars we put together this year, and we're grateful to you. Feel free to be in contact. If there's other content that you'd like to hear more about, and please know that behind the scenes, our education advocacy team is working to expand, preserve this program, and make sure that graduate education and training is fair and equitable for all. Jenny, thank you also so much for saying yes when I asked if we could put this on.
Yes, of course. And thank you guys all for logging in. And thank you, Eddie.
My pleasure. Have a great rest of the year, everybody.